Today we are going to talk about classical drug discovery. During the course of this lecture, we would be talking about the synonyms of classical drug discovery. We'll be talking about some definitions, and we'll talk about some sources of natural products. We'll talk about the importance of classical drug discovery. We'll have an introduction to natural product isolation and characterization. We'll discuss why classical drug discovery went out of flavor. So those are our objectives for this lecture. So the synonyms for classical drug discovery are forward, it's also called forward pharmacological approach. It's also called compound-centered approach. It's also called phenotypic drug delivery. And it's also sometimes called irrational drug discovery. So these are the terms that we encounter often in literature when we refer to classical drug discovery. So let us look at some definitions. Let's look at what a natural product is. So natural product is any small molecule that has its origin in a biological entity. The biological entity can be varied. It can be, say, plants. It could be animals. It could be bacteria. It could be fungi. It could be virus. Okay, or it could also be, if from plants we do a tissue culture, then that tissue culture could be a source of, it could be considered a biological entity. Similarly, if we have animal cell culture, that also would be called a biological entity. Okay. So, what's a natural product? Any small molecule, so a natural product, it is abbreviated NP, it is any small molecule that has got its origin in a biological entity. So when we say small molecule, what do we mean? We mean a molecule that has got molecular weight less than 1000 dalton. Okay, so that is a small molecule. Okay, so we have defined what a natural product is and what are the different sources of natural products. So all this that we have described here, they are all sources of natural product. So when we say a natural product, we actually mean a pure compound. Okay, we mean a pure compound that is isolated from natural products. Okay, so we mean a pure compound that has been isolated from a natural product. So when we typically don't mean an extract. Okay, so we don't mean an extract. Okay. So technically, the definition is narrowed down to pure compounds which are isolated from natural products. Okay. Okay. So what is classical drug discovery then? Classical drug discovery is when we use a natural product to finally obtain, when we use a natural product source to obtain a natural product. All the steps that is involved in this process is called classical drug discovery. Okay, meaning we take, say, if it's a plant, we take an extract of the plant, and we subject it to phenotypic screening. What is our goal of doing a phenotypic screen? To do a bioactivity guided fractionation to obtain a natural product which is to be made into a drug. Okay. So this whole process by which we do this, we call it a classical drug discovery. The important thing to remember is the phenotypic screen can be at the cellular level or subcellular. When it's subcellular, those assays we call the assays in vitro assays. And at the cellular level, we call it in vivo. Okay, so we do in vivo screening, in vitro screening, okay, or in vivo screening and in vitro screening to finally arrive at a drug. This whole process, we call it classical drug discovery. Okay. And the opposite of using target, okay. So before we make it into a drug, we already know what the drug target is. And we validate the target to arrive at the drug. So when we use a drug target and then try to do assays, that becomes a target-based drug discovery. Okay, so that's the modern drug discovery is target-based drug discovery. Okay. Target-based drug discovery. Okay. So that is why it is called reverse pharmacology. Okay. Why is it called reverse pharmacology? In the modern approach, the target-based drug discovery is called reverse pharmacology because it goes opposite to the process that is adopted for classical drug discovery. We have learned the difference between classical drug discovery and the modern drug discovery approach, and we now know the difference between forward pharmacology and reverse pharmacology. Okay, so when we use an extract of a natural product to arrive at a drug, we call it forward pharmacology. When we do the opposite, we arrive at the effect of the drug from the drug target to the effect, then we call it reverse pharmacology. So why should we study classical drug discovery? So why have we selected, or why have we opted to learn about classical drug discovery? Now, from antiquity, we have written evidence of the use of plants for their medicinal properties. Okay, from antiquity, we have written evidence. Okay. What is the evidence we are talking about? For example, there is a book called Pen Sao. This is a Chinese Materia Medica. This was written in the year around 2500 BC. Okay. The other important reference book is something called the Ebers Papyrus that was discovered in Egypt, and this has been dated to 1500 BC. Okay, there are other accounts before that, but these books are considered, the first written evidence, okay, of the use of plants for their medicinal properties. But those days, they did not do an isolation of the active principle. Rather, what they did was they converted the plants into certain dosage forms like tinctures, teas. Okay. Nowadays, we have herbal teas that are in vogue. Teas, there were poultices, and there were powders. Okay. These dosage forms that we call galenicals. So people were using galenicals for as medicines. It was somewhere in the 1800s, the 19th century, that a pharmacist called Friedrich Serturner he isolated morphine from the latex of the poppy plant. The latex of the poppy plant. What is that scientifically called? If you said Papaver somniferum, you're correct. Okay. He isolated morphine from the latex. Okay, so this was the first time that the active principle was isolated. Okay. So this led to, in time, other important drugs were isolated. For example, let's begin with morphine. There was a drug for malaria. Now, if you remember, hydroxychloroquine, it's being used for COVID-19. Okay, it's a derivative of quinine. Then the important drug would be reserpine. Okay, for hypertension. Then there was cocaine, okay, which became the basis for local anesthetics, which are today instilled into the eye. And ephedrine. In Chinese, the Chinese people call it ma huang, and of course meant for diseases of the respiratory tract, like asthma. So, these all drugs were obtained from classical pharmacology. Today we have among the most important drugs, top 100 drugs if we take, there is salbutamol. Okay, salbutamol was again derived from a natural product. So in all these years, a better drug has not been found, okay, which can replace salbutamol. And so this is the importance of classical drug discovery. Okay. So we said that the source is a natural product is the starting point. Starting point to obtain the drug. So the story of how a drug is obtained from a natural product is what we are going to discuss now. Okay, so we are going to talk about isolation and characterization. Okay. So the natural product can be anything. It can be, as we said, plants. What were the things that we talked about? We talked about plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, viruses. It can also be marine organisms. Okay. Does any drug which are sourced from marine organisms come to your mind? If you said actinicidin, which is given for liposarcoma. And another drug, could it be ziconotide? Okay, this is a painkiller. Okay. So marine organisms are also natural products. So when we say isolation, we mean any of the natural product sources. So first, to isolate the active principle, what do? We need to do a bit of pre-processing, and after pre-processing, we need to do processing. Okay? So let's see what is pre-processing. So pre-processing is the events before we actually do a chemical process. Okay, chemical or a physical process. Pre-processing is also some physical processes. Okay. The first one is we need to collect the natural products. So where are natural products seen? Natural products definitely occur in nature. Okay. So the best place to collect natural products would be nature. Okay. I think it is. Okay. It would be nature. Now, natural products, if we call it plants, these plants can also be found in places, maybe in the cities. But still, nature, in the natural habitat would be a better option. Why? Because pesticides would be less. Okay, there would be less pesticides, meaning it will not interfere with the results that we get. In addition, we have to make sure that it is not contaminated. It is not contaminated. Okay. What can contaminate it? Suppose it's a plant. Let's say this is a plant. Again, these are all roots of the plant. Okay. So what can happen is there can be commensal organisms. Okay. There can be fungi. Okay. There can be mosses. Okay. So we have to ensure in collection that we are not collecting these along with what we intend to collect, because the presence of this can definitely interfere with our results. Okay, so we have to ensure that it is pesticide free. Okay, so pesticide, so first point would be pesticide free. Second, it should not be contaminated. Third, we have to ensure that similar looking plants are not collected. Okay, because in the natural environment, there could be a very similar looking plant which is growing near to what is desired. And so if we collect that, that again will interfere with our results. Okay. So these are the most important things that we need to keep in mind when we are collecting. Okay. Then, upon collection, there are a few things that we need to do again. Okay, we are talking about collection. We have to do a bit of documentation. Okay. We have to document the time of collection, okay, the date of collection, the location, and maybe even take photographs. Then a specimen for the preparation of herbarium. Okay, herbariums are basically permanent collections. And record. Okay, it's a permanent physical record. It's a permanent physical record. So basically what a herbarium is you take card paper and you put your specimen, then you overlay it with another card, okay, and then put weight over the top. Okay, so in between you have got the specimen, and then you leave it for maybe 10 to 14 days. Okay, and you check in between. If the cardboard has become damp, then you need to replace it with a fresh cardboard. And when you dry it, you transfer it to a paper, this specimen to a paper, Suppose this is the specimen, and then you put a label, okay, you tag it, you put a title to it, okay. So this is called a herbarium. Okay. So at this time, this specimen for herbarium should also be collected. Then a voucher specimen. What is a voucher specimen? A voucher specimen is a specimen of your collection that you deposit with a curator to be part of the collection of the museum. Okay. So why are we doing all this? Because in science, we need reproducibility. So anyone wants to verify can always go back to the original specimen and can reproduce the work. Okay. Moreover, the herbarium can also be a source of raw material for other researchers. So at the time of collection, we need to document all these aspects. Okay. So now we collect, then we clean. So we clean it out of other contaminants. Okay, which can be soil, so it has to be cleaned. Maybe you need to strip the leaves and all that. So cleaning. After cleaning, we need to dry the specimen. So the purpose of drying is to remove what? The water content. Okay. So this plant is a tissue. It is a tissue, and this tissue contains enzymes, and these enzymes may degrade the tissue. So if we reduce the water content, then we can inhibit the enzymes. Okay, so we are trying to prevent deterioration. So we prevent deterioration by drying. So how can we dry? We can dry it in the shade, or we can dry it artificially. By passing warm air over it. Warm to hot air over the specimen. So when we do it artificially, we have to make sure that we do not degrade the sample. Degrade the sample because it's basically containing lots of chemicals, and if we heat it too much, then it may undergo some chemical changes. We don't want that happening. Okay, and if it is maybe if the constituent does not biodegrade, then this is not an issue. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is to identify. Okay. So it should be an acknowledged authority should identify. It can be the curator of a museum or a botanist, a renowned botanist. So they need to authenticate the sample. Okay, so this is for authentication. Okay. Then we begin the steps of processing. Okay, in processing, the first step is size reduction. So why do we need size reduction? Because the next process is extraction. Okay, so the idea is we are talking here about a plant. So the plant may be, if I represent this as a plant cell, the desired components are present within the cell, and this is the natural product, and this natural product is a secondary metabolite. Okay. So the question is, what is a secondary metabolite? Okay. A secondary metabolite is a metabolite that is not essential for growth and normal metabolism. Okay, growth is also a part of metabolism. So secondary metabolites they are not essential. Okay, meaning the plant or the natural source can live without the secondary metabolite. Okay, so that is why it's called secondary metabolite. So the things that are needed for growth and metabolism, those are primary metabolites. So what could be the examples of primary metabolites? It can be proteins, okay, fats, carbohydrates. Okay, so these are examples of primary metabolites. They are needed for the normal growth and metabolism of the organism, and which are not essential, they are secondary metabolites, like say example would be alkaloids, say erythritol. Okay, so yeah, so this natural product is present within the cell, and now when we do a size reduction, we might be disrupting the cells and tissues, because the next event is extraction. We are going to use a solvent to dissolve the secondary metabolite and then bring it back. Okay, so the solvent goes into the cell, dissolves it and brings it back. So if we disrupt the cell and the tissues, the solvent can easily enter. Okay, and then mass transfer happens when the surface area is more. So size reduction increases surface area, and that can increase mass transfer. Okay, and that increases both of this, increases efficiency of extraction. Okay, so size reduction. Now you can do a coarse, usually we do a coarse particles are produced. Okay, so coarse size reduction, not very fine powders, because if it becomes fine powders, then it has got the tendency to aggregate, and then the efficiency of the solvent to transfer the mass would become less. Okay, so we don't use very fine powders for extraction. Okay, so what is extraction? We have already mentioned it is using a solvent to dissolve the secondary metabolite from the cell and bring it back into the solvent, so that now the active principle is present in the solvent, not in the solid. So there is a transfer from solid to liquid. And then if the liquid is removed, it becomes easy to separate those components from the solid part. So there are different methods of extraction. Okay. So there is maceration. So in maceration, what happens? The coarsely powdered drug is kept in contact with the solvent for a defined period, and it would be frequently agitated until the solid matter or the soluble matter is dissolved. Okay, so maceration is usually done for thermolabile secondary metabolites. Okay. Then there is infusion. Okay, so infusion, what do we do for infusion? We macerate the coarsely powdered natural product with either cold or boiling water. Okay. So it is a dilute solution of the active principle. Then there is percolation. Okay, so what is a percolator? Percolator is basically a glass container. It is kind of a cone-shaped vessel. Okay. And the drug can be packed in a thimble. Okay. And the solvent can be added, and it is allowed to stand, and there is a valve here, so the valve is closed, and the percolator with the solvent and the drug is allowed to stand for maybe up to 4 hours, and then the valve is released to get the percolate. Okay, so percolation. Okay. So digestion. Digestion is maceration, but little bit of heat is applied. Okay. So the heat should not be so much that the solvent evaporates off. So that is digestion. Okay. Decoction is when it is boiled with water for about 15 minutes and then cooling and then passing some cold water to make up the volume. Okay, so that is decoction. So what is most commonly used for extraction is the next one. Okay. So this is the most widely used method for the extraction of natural product. But the caveat is the natural product should not be thermolabile. Okay, only then this hot continuous extraction is done. The equipment that is used to do the low hole hot extraction is called the Soxhlet. It's got a siphon that siphons off the solvent and recirculates the solvent. So that is why it is called hot continuous extraction. Okay. So what is done is basically something called successive extraction, in which solvents of increasing polarity, so if you look at this, polarity increases from top to bottom. So successive extraction, meaning say 2 liters of petroleum extract is used in the Soxhlet apparatus. The petroleum Ether is basically defatting. It will extract the fat and other materials, and it gets recirculated at least 4 or 5 times. It has to recirculate, and then that extract is removed, and the drug is then dried. And then the process is repeated with the next solvent, the next solvent, the next solvent, the next solvent, and the next solvent. So that is why it is called successive extraction. Okay, so usually 2 liters. It is used in a sock slit apparatus, and at least 4 to 6 times it's allowed to recirculate. Then whatever it is obtained, that is removed, and then the mark. The mark is pressed and dried, then repacked. And then the process is repeated. Repeated with the next solvent. So different extracts are obtained. Petroleum ether extract is obtained, then ethyl acetate extract is obtained, chloroform extract is obtained, acetone is obtained, methanol is obtained, and aqueous extract is obtained. Okay. So then what happens is, these extracts, okay, so what we get after the process is, we get extracts. Okay, so let us name this A, B, C, D, E, and F. So extracts A, B, C, D, E, F is obtained. Okay. Then each of this extract is put into a rotary vacuum evaporator. Okay, so this rotary vacuum evaporator removes the solvent. Okay, so a concentrate is obtained. A concentrate of that particular extract is obtained. So this process is applied to all these extracts. Okay, so concentrate at the end of this process, concentrate A, concentrate B, concentrate C, concentrate D, concentrate E, and concentrate F is obtained. Okay. So then what happens? Each of this concentrate is subjected to phytochemical analysis. Okay, so what is phytochemical analysis? You'll subject it to, say, test for alkaloids. Okay. What are the tests for alkaloids? What tests? If you said Myers test, you're right. And maybe Wagner's test. Okay, so if there are any other tests for alkaloid, you do that. Okay, then you test for what? Amino acids. Okay, that is the test, ninhydrin test, say. Then you could test for carbohydrates. Okay, that could be the test, malicious test. Benedict's test. Yeah. Then we could do the test for what the other metabolites could be: fixed oils, fats. Okay, so we could do a spot test or a saponification test. Okay, we could do a test for glycosides. Born-Trager's test. You could do a glycosides legal test. Okay. Then you could do for maybe phenolics, tannins, phenolics and tannins. What could be that? Tannins, ferric chloride test. You could do a gelatin test, yes. You could do lead acetate test. You could do an alkaline reagent test. Could do a magnesium and hydrochloric acid reduction test. Then you could do a test for phytosterols. Maybe Millen's test, biuret test. Could do a test for saponins. Could do a test for gums and mucilages. You could do a test for volatile oil. So these are the tests that one could do. Okay. So that is phytochemical analysis. Okay. And then what you do is you have got this concentrates. Then what you do is the next step is so we have subjected part of it to phytochemical analysis. Next thing we do is we take these concentrates and then subject them to bioassays. Okay. So usually we do lots of bioassays. We do bioassay on concentrate A, B, C, D, E, and F. And we find, say, we are interested in finding the cardiovascular activity. Okay, and we are seeing activity only in C. Okay, so suppose only C gives bioactivity. Okay, so maybe it reduces, say, the serious activity that we are looking at is reduction in blood pressure. So the component C is found to decrease blood pressure. Okay, so now what we do is, so we have subjected A, B, C, D, E, and F to bioassays. And we have seen the required bioactivity is only seen with fraction C. So we select C for isolation and characterization. Okay, so this process by which we use bioassays to select the component for further analysis, we call it bioactivity guided fractionation. Okay, so this is bioactivity guided fractionation. Okay. Okay. So we have done by now biological screenings in relevant bioassays. Why did we do that? To select the component for separation and isolation. Okay, so the technique we have used is bioactivity guided fractionation. And we have selected the components for separation and isolation. Okay. So how do we separate and isolate? So we use certain techniques to isolate, to separate or isolate. What is the technique that is used? We use chromatography. Okay. We do two types of chromatography. We do analytic chromatography and preparative. Okay, analytical chromatography is done just to identify. Okay, preparative is done to separate in quantity. Okay, for example, say we do a thin layer chromatography. Okay, we do a thin layer chromatography. An analytical chromatography, we suppose this is a spot, this RF is for say alkaloids. Okay. So an analytical TLC will show us the presence of alkaloids. Okay. Now what we do, we take a very thick layer of TLC, and that is called preparative TLC, and we run the thing and we get a spot. Now what we do is we can scrape this spot off, okay, and put it into an appropriate solvent. Then we can recover the separated component. Okay, when we use it for separation, we call it preparative. So we do analytic and preparative chromatography. And chromatography is of different types. Here we have explained thin layer chromatography. Okay. So there are also column chromatography. Okay. So usually column chromatography is the most important technique that is used in isolation and separation of components. So here again we come back to this. We have got this concentrated extract. We have selected C. Now this component is subjected to column chromatography. Okay. So C was what? C was a chloroform extract. Okay. So that can be subject to column chromatography, and that will separate out the component. Okay. Separate out the component. Okay. So that is what we do here. Okay. So now we have isolated the compound. Now after isolation, what do we do? So we isolate the component and we get maybe, when we remove the solvent, we get a crystal. Okay. This crystal may contain other components. So what do we need to do? This crystal, we need to purify the crystal. How can we purify crystals? By recrystallization. Okay, so we do a recrystallization. Now we get maybe a crystal. If we get a pure crystal, then we can send it for X-ray crystallography. Okay, if it is a large sized crystal, then it can be a candidate for X-ray crystallography. Now, if suppose it does not crystallize, or it is not very pure, okay, we try maximum to purify it, then we can do UV spectroscopy. We can do Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. We can do mass spectroscopy. Okay. Both this we subject to all these techniques, okay, or sometimes hyphenated techniques. What is hyphenated techniques? When you use more than one technique simultaneously, we call it a hyphenated technique, like GCMS. Okay. So this is a hyphenated technique. So from UV spectroscopy, what data will we get? We will get whether there is a chromophoric structure. Okay, for example, aromatic compounds. Okay, they are usually chromophoric phenolic compounds. They are chromophoric. They produce a color, and that can be determined by UV spectroscopy. If we do FTIR, then we can get an idea about the functional groups. Okay. And by mass spectroscopy and comparison with the library, we can actually get the compound. We can also quantify it. We can get the concentration. Okay. And hyphenated techniques, if the component is volatile, we can subject it to GCMS. And again, comparison with the library will give us the actual compound. Okay, so X-ray crystallography will give us the definitive crystal structure, okay, from which we can determine the chemical structure. We can determine the chemical structure. Okay, so the techniques that we use to determine and obtain the chemical structure, we call it characterization. Okay. So now we have characterized, we have isolated the compound. And now what is left is target identification and validation. Okay. So we said we looked at component C, and we said that it has got an activity for blood pressure. Okay, we already know what is blood pressure. Okay, heart rate into end diastolic volume into total peripheral resistance. Okay, so what is blood pressure? It is a product of cardiac output into total peripheral resistance. And what is cardiac output? It is heart rate into end diastolic volume. Now, if this drug, we have found it to decrease the blood pressure, we have looked at an assay, and let us say we have looked at the blood pressure of maybe a rabbit. Okay, and we look at normal, and we say the heart rate is, in a normal it is maybe around say 180. Okay, this is normally the heart rate of a rabbit. You gave this extract C, what has happened is the heart rate has decreased. Okay, it has gone to maybe 70. So you know that the heart rate has decreased. So now our hypothesis is it has got an effect of reducing heart rate. Now, if something has to reduce the heart rate, it has to act on the SA node. Okay. Or if it might be a diuretic. But then if it's a diuretic, what can happen? The heart rate will increase. So the option is that, the most feasible option is that it is having an effect on the SA node. It has reduced the heart rate. So now in the SA node, you are looking at what are the receptors there. Okay, you have got beta receptors, okay, beta 1 receptor, and you've got acetylcholine receptor. So acetylcholine, we already know it only. If it is an agonist, it will reduce the heart rate. So we can eliminate this as a. So now our hypothesis is it might be acting on beta 1 receptor. Now, if we know the structure of C is known, it can be compared with other drugs which are known to act on beta 1. So if there is a structural similarity, then we have got some more support for our hypothesis that it is acting on beta 1. So now what can we do? If the structure of beta 1 itself is known, okay, if in the protein database contains the X-ray crystallographic structure of beta 1, then we know our structure and we can then do docking studies. Okay, if we do docking studies and if we can find binding, then again there is support for our hypothesis. Okay. Then we can do modification of the structure of our drug, and then we can go for different types of modification. We can convert it into a lead. Okay. So the next steps after target identification and validation is we are looking at an animal model and we are giving the drug and we are going to say that it has got a therapeutic effect. So that is called validation. So after that, what can we do? We can convert it into a lead. Then we can make the lead we can optimize the lead to become a candidate drug. This candidate drug can be taken through clinical trials for us to obtain the drug, regulatory approval. So when we get the regulatory approval, it becomes a drug. So these are the typical stages how we obtain a drug from a natural product. Okay, this is the forward pharmacological approach that we have discussed. Okay. So there are two ways in which the industry does the job of extraction. They use two models. One is a sequential polarity based approach, which we have discussed. We have discussed the drugs, the solvent with different polarities are used sequentially. So that is sequential polarity. The other way that they do is, if suppose the activity of the extract is already known. Okay, like say from traditional systems like Ayurveda. Okay. Then this approach, which is called the parallel approach, is employed. So here what is done, the plant is extracted with 100% methanolic extract, 50% aqueous methanolic extract, and 100% aqueous extract. And then the methanolic part of it is subjected to extraction with hexane, chloroform, butanol, aqueous fraction, etc. And then it passes through the other stage. So this is another approach that is used for biocide. So this was reported by in this paper. Okay, so this is a Ayurvedic journal. So this is one of the options that is followed. But the most commonly reported procedure is sequential polarity based extraction. Okay, so that is the one that is being reported most. Okay. So with that, let us recap what we learned in this lecture. Okay. We talked about classical drug discovery. We have talked about the synonyms of classical drug discovery. It is called forward pharmacological approach, compound-centered approach, phenotypic drug discovery, and sometimes irrational drug discovery. Okay, and we have seen why we have called it a forward pharmacological approach, and we have seen the current approach is a reverse pharmacological approach. We have looked at a definition of a natural product, and also we have talked about what is classical drug discovery, and we have talked which are the sources of natural products. Okay, we have said that natural products can be plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, viruses. Okay, it can also be marine organisms, etc. Okay, and we have talked about the introduction to the isolation and characterization. We have given a broad outline of what is being done to isolate something. Okay. So now we are going to discuss the question, why did classical drug discovery go out of flavor? Okay. In other words, why did the industry decide to abandon the classical drug discovery approach? Okay, so this is the question that we are trying to answer. Why did the industry decide to abandon the classical drug discovery approach? Now, there are many reasons for this. So one of the main reasons is that classical drug discovery One of the main reasons is classical drug discovery is time and capital intensive. Okay, meaning it takes lots of time and lots of money to do classical drug discovery. Okay, this is one of the reasons. Okay, so the industry, if you think about it, the industry has got a pressure. Okay, the industry is under pressure to deliver blockbuster drugs. What are blockbuster drugs? The drugs which have got sales greater than 1 billion USD per US dollars per year. So that's a blockbuster drug. So they have got a tremendous pressure to deliver blockbuster drugs. So the idea is, if there are lots of drugs entering the pipeline, if there are lots of candidate drugs or kits or leads, if there are lots of leads entering the pipeline, then there will be lots of drugs exiting the pipeline. The pipeline. Okay. So the idea is you are trying to populate the pipeline. Now, in classical drug discovery, what happens? You need to look at a natural product. You need to collect it. Okay. And then you need to do all the isolation procedures. And then you will get a structure. Okay. This is taking lots of time. So, populating the pipeline with lots of such structures becomes difficult because there is lots of time and money. Okay, so the best approach then for the industry is to go for combinatorial chemistry. Or synthetic chemistry. Okay, so if you do synthetic chemistry, then you get lots of compounds in a very short period of time, so you can populate the pipeline. Okay. Right, so that is one of the reasons. Second reason is there is something called a convention on biodiversity. Okay, this tells you that if suppose there is a plant that is indigenous to a part of a country, it is indigenous to a country, and if you use this plant, then you have to share the profit that you make with this country. Okay, so business-wise, it is a loss of revenue. So this could potentially result in a loss of revenue. Okay, so once this treaty came into existence, for the industry, it didn't make sense to continue pursuing it because it is eating into the profit. Okay. So we have talked about time and then. Okay, the third thing is supply. Okay, so if you want to make a natural product a source, then it becomes very difficult. Okay, because maybe only 0.01% of the natural product, okay, maybe only 0.01% of the natural product gives you a drug. So you need lots of natural product to make lots of drug. Okay, so there is a question of supply. And this supply is again dependent, in a natural product, it is dependent on the climate. Okay, and the presence of the active principle depends on the season. Okay, so there is seasonal variation. And there are lots of variations. So that does not, it is risky for the company. Okay, the fourth reason is that the structures are complicated. Okay, so you discover a structure, say it's a natural product, you get a very complicated structure which is difficult to synthesize. So if it takes lots of steps to synthesize it, it means the cost of production will grow up drastically and it doesn't make economic sense. So complicated structures. 5. The fifth reason is that natural products, they are chromogenic, meaning some of them or most of them are colored. Now, high throughput screening uses colorimetric detection. Okay, high throughput screening utilizes colorimetric detection, okay, to do the assay. Now, if you got already a colored compound, that colored compound will interfere with high throughput screening assay. So it is not very feasible to use. So there is a technical difficulty in using high throughput screening. So the industry is using high throughput screening, and if that assay procedure cannot be used for a natural product library, then there is a problem. Okay, so these are some of the most important reasons why the industry has abandoned the classical drug discovery approach. Okay, yet there are few companies like Novartis that are involved in bioprospecting. What is bioprospecting? It is prospecting. What is prospecting? Trying to find out. Prospecting the biosphere for drugs. Okay, so they are involved a little bit in classical drug discovery. And there are academic laboratories which are doing classical drug discovery. But as far as the industry is concerned, they have almost abandoned it. Okay. But now there is a resurgence. Okay. Now industries are trying to use natural products. Okay. Why? Because technology has advanced. Okay. Now isolation and characterization has become very fast. Okay. And therefore, with slight modification, it can be used. And then the success rate with combinatorial chemistry has not been very great. Okay. So, has not been as much as expected. Okay. And then now the thinking is that for natural products, it has been selected by evolution. Okay. So evolution has designed it to interact with proteins. Okay. So therefore, perhaps they are better drugs. better drugs, meaning they have got increased safety, increased efficacy, and greater benefit than risk. Okay, so that is why there is a resurgence. And so nowadays phenotypic screens are part of the drug discovery process of many of the industries. Okay. Okay. So, in this presentation, we have only looked at small molecule drug discovery. Okay. So we have not looked at the classical drug discovery approach of biologicals. Okay, so that is the limitation of this lecture. And with that, let us conclude the presentation.